for the resignation of House Speaker Gerg Fergus. He is facing questions about his future after he scolded the Conservative leader during question period yesterday.
Will he announce now that his experiment with legalizing hard drugs in BC is over? Yes or no?
His policies are wacko. Hiking the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre, wacko. Doubling housing costs, wacko.
Over $100 million stolen from Canadian taxpayers, and the CRA is covering it up. This isn't some conspiracy theory. It's the explosive truth Pierre Polievre just exposed. Gerg Fergus's reaction? Pure panic. See the moment he realizes his corruption is finally catching up to him. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. In Parliament, Pierre Polievre shocked everyone with a shocking revelation. You won't believe what is taking place right in front of our eyes after he revealed the startling truth about child killers in Canadian jails. It turns out that medium security prisons house some of the most dangerous offenders who have been found guilty of heinous crimes against children. It's not even the worst part, though. In fact, these murderers are near children who come to the prisons for different programs. Can you see how dangerous this is? Polievre didn't mince words. He gave you unsettling information about particular cases that will make you shudder. For instance, Terry Ly McClintock, an 8-year-old girl, was brutally murdered by this monster. Additionally, McClintock is currently being held in a facility where children may be present due to the policies of the current government. Polievre didn't hold back in his passionate speech. The government's careless disregard for public safety was criticized by him. How can they justify putting innocent children at risk? Asked him. As Polievre presented the facts and his opponents wriggled in their seats, the tension in the room was evident. You could see the color fading from government officials' faces as Polievre continued to reveal things. They were aware that they were in a tight spot and that there was no plausible reason for this ridiculous circumstance.
It was the 8th out of the last 9th economic quarter where our per capita GDP shrunk. It's fallen more than any other G7 country since the year before COVID. Canada reported terrible news for the Canadian economy today. It grew at a meager 1%, a third lower than foreseen, and lower than our population grew. In fact, this is the direct result of higher taxes on capital gains, on energy, on work. Why won't they accept our common sense plan? Better yet, why don't they call a carbon tax election so we can fix the economy?
There you go.
Their feeble attempts to defend the policy only serve to exacerbate the situation and demonstrate how disconnected they are from the issues facing regular Canadians. The weak reaction of the government? They assert that appropriate safeguards are in place and that these arrangements are safe. However, Polievre didn't believe it, and you shouldn't either. A system that permits child killers to be in close proximity to defenseless children is untrustworthy. After Polievre's shocking disclosures, everyone's attention was focused on Gerg Fergus. He was perspiring and the pressure was on. How could he justify such an unjustifiable policy? Prepare yourself because Fergus's response is going to drive this scandal to a new level of craziness. It may seem impossible to defend child killers in close proximity to children, but Gerg Fergus had a different idea. His attempt to defend this ridiculous policy descended into a flurry of inconsistencies and personal assaults. Was this merely incompetence? Or did Fergus unintentionally expose something much darker? Fergus stood up to talk, trying to look cool and collected. But Polievre's incessant interrogation soon caused his facade to fall apart. Fergus began by stating that the safety of children who participate in this long-standing mother-child program is obviously a top priority for the correctional service. However, his feeble defense only made matters worse. Polievre persisted in asking Fergus about the details of how child killers might be prevented from harming defenseless children. Fergus began to lose his temper. He fumbled and stammered, unable to come up with specific responses. He instead went so far as to categorically reject Polievre's assertions, stating that the facts that she just alleged are entirely fabricated. However, we are all aware of the fact that Polievre had revealed a terrible truth. Fergus's arguments grew increasingly desperate and contradictory as the debate heated up. In what universe would that conduct that she alleges be appropriate? he asked, attempting to refute Polievre's description of the scenario. In Canada, the response is no scenario. However, why was Fergus initially defending the policy if that were the case? Fergus got himself into a bigger hole the more he spoke. He was unable to describe how the government makes sure the kids in these programs are safe. He was unable to defend the placement of child killers in medium security facilities. His every word only served to highlight how out of touch and reckless the government truly is. Fergus finally snapped, his back to the wall. He started attacking people personally, dropping any pretense of dealing with the real problem. Polievre, he said, was providing a disservice and is disrespectful to the victims of these very people he keeps naming in this House of Commons. It was a pitiful attempt to divert attention away from his own shortcomings and the unacceptable policies of the government. The truth was made clear by Fergus's breakdown. The government has no valid reason for this risky circumstance. The extent of this corruption is demonstrated by his feeble justifications and eventual use of personal attacks. It also poses the terrifying query: what other terrible secrets is the government keeping from us? Consider yelling contests in Parliament to be commonplace? Rethink your thought. Even seasoned MPs were taken aback by what transpired next. The very underpinnings of Canadian democracy appeared to tremble as charges were made and tempers raged. At the heart of it all was a damning revelation that had the potential to topple the entire government. There was utter chaos in the House of Commons. The debate descended into a full-fledged political brawl as MPs from all sides entered the fray. With their voices rising in righteous rage, Conservative members united behind Poilievre. They banged on their desks, demanding answers, and demanding that something be done right away. The shocking revelations took the Liberals by surprise, and they rushed to justify their disastrous policy. It was an unprecedented moment in Canadian politics. As MPs exchanged accusations, shouts reverberated throughout the chamber. "You're endangering children," shouted one Conservative member. A Liberal retorted, "How dare you exploit victims for political gain?" As partisan animosity and years of bottled-up frustration boiled over, the air crackled with tension. Some MPs attempted to bring order back amid the chaos. However, the thunderous roar of irate voices and crashing desks overpowered their cries. "The Conservative members are making a joke of this place," yelled a frustrated Liberal member. However, his remarks only served to fan the flames, igniting yet another round of contentious discussions. Everyone's attention was focused on the Speaker as the chaos reached a fever pitch. He could control this craziness, surely. However, the unprecedented degree of chaos appeared to overwhelm even the Speaker. His voice strained as he tried to break through the clamor. He called for order several times. He begged, but to little avail. "I invite members to withdraw comments that breach parliamentary privilege." Efforts by the Speaker to uphold decorum were ignored. Despite parliamentary rules, MPs persisted in making accusations and insulting others. It served as a sobering reminder of how profoundly this scandal had rocked Canadian politics to its core. The public's response to the news of the parliamentary meltdown was rapid and intense. Outrage erupted on social media, and people began to demand answers in the street. The incident was referred to by the media as a circus, underscoring the government's utter inability to handle the pressing problem. This scandal was obviously far from over, with the opposition smelling blood and public trust in ruins. The chaos in Parliament may have seemed terrible to you, but it was nothing in comparison to what transpired next. A tidal wave of rage that threatened to destroy everything in its path was unleashed by the revelations about child killers in Canadian prisons. What was the government's reaction to this extraordinary outcry? Anger erupted among Canadians as word of the scandal spread. Social media was ablaze with hashtags calling for reform and justice. Individuals who had never participated in political discourse before were glued to their screens, exchanging updates and demanding action. People from all walks of life were united in their disgust at the government's careless disregard for the safety of children, and the rage was evident. However, the indignation was not limited to the internet. With their signs and chants echoing the sentiment of millions, protesters took to the streets of Canadian cities. As crowds gathered outside government buildings, the slogans, "Keep our kids safe" and "No killers near children" became rallying points. The normally placid Canadian public had been strained to the limit. Long dissatisfied with what they perceived to be a lax justice system, victims' advocacy groups took advantage of the opportunity to spread their message. They shared heartbreaking accounts of families ripped apart by violence during interviews and press conferences. They made it very evident that the government's policies were not only misguided, but also harmful and insensitive to victims. Legal professionals entered the battle and dismantled the government's feeble defenses. They noted that the risk posed by convicted child killers was unaffected by the safety record of the mother-child program. Officials were left scrambling for answers after the experts' harsh criticisms further revealed the weaknesses in the government's reasoning.